And when your journey seems too hard, and when you run into a chorus of cynics who tell you that you're being foolish to keep believing, or that you can't do something, or that you should just give up, or you should just settle, you might say to yourself a little phrase that I've found handy these last 8 years. Yes, we can. Because as my grandmother used to tell me, every time a fool speaks, they are just advertising their own ignorance. Let them talk. If you don't, you just make them a victim. And then they can avoid accountability. That doesn't mean you shouldn't challenge them. Have the confidence to challenge them. Confidence in the rightness of your position. There will be times when you shouldn't compromise your core values, your integrity, and you will have the responsibility to speak up in the face of injustice. But listen, engage. If the other side has a point, learn from them. If they're wrong, rebut them, teach them, beat them on the battlefield of ideas. And you might as well start practicing now, because one thing I can guarantee you, you will have to deal with ignorance, hatred, racism, foolishness, trifling folks. I promise you will have to deal with all that at every stage of your life. That may not seem fair, but life has never been completely fair. Nobody promised you a crystal stair. And if you want to make life fair, then you've got to start with the world as it is. So that's my advice. That's how you change things. Change isn't something that happens every 4 years or 8 years. Change is not placing your faith in any particular politician and then just putting your feet up and saying, okay, go. Change is the effort of committed citizens who hitch their wagons to something bigger than themselves and fight for it every single day. That's what Thurgood Marshall understood. The truth is that your generation is better positioned than any before you to meet those challenges, to flip the script. Now, how you do that, how you meet these challenges, how you bring about change, will ultimately be up to you. My generation, like all generations, is too confined by our own experience, too invested in our own biases, too stuck in our ways to provide much of the new thinking that will be required. But us old heads have learned a few things that might be useful in your journey. So with the rest of my time, I'd like to offer some suggestions for how young leaders like you can fulfill your destiny and shape our collective future, bend it in the direction of justice and equality and freedom. First of all, and this should not be a problem for this group, be confident in your heritage. Be confident in your blackness. One of the great changes that's occurred in our country since I was your age is the realization there's no one way to be black. There's no straitjacket. There's no constraints. There's no litmus test for authenticity. And because of those who come before you, you have models to follow. You can work for a company or start your own. You can go into politics or run an organization that holds politicians accountable. You can write a book that wins the National Book Award, or you can write the new run of Black Panther, or like one of your alumni, Ta-Nehisi Coates, you can go ahead and just do both. You can create your own style, set your own standard of beauty, embrace your own sexuality. You need to have the same confidence. And because you're a black person doing whatever it is that you're doing, that makes it a black thing. Feel confident. Second, even as we each embrace our own beautiful, unique, and valid versions of our blackness, remember the tie that does bind us as African Americans, and that is our particular awareness of injustice and unfairness and struggle. That means we cannot sleepwalk through life. We cannot be ignorant of history. We can't meet the world with a sense of entitlement. We can't walk by a homeless man without asking why a society as wealthy as ours allows that state of affairs to occur. We can't just lock up a low-level dealer without asking why this boy, barely out of childhood, felt he had no other options. We have cousins and uncles and brothers and sisters who we remember were just as smart and just as talented as we were, but somehow got ground down by structures that are unfair and unjust. And that means we have to not only question the world as it is and stand up for those African Americans who haven't been so lucky, Because yes, you've worked hard, but you've also been lucky. That's a pet peeve of mine. People who've been successful and don't realize they've been lucky. That God may have blessed them. It wasn't nothing you did. So don't have an attitude. But we must also expand our moral imaginations to understand and empathize with all people who are struggling. Not just black folks who are struggling. The refugee, the immigrant, the rural poor, the transgender person. And yes, the middle-aged white guy who you may think has all the advantages, but over the last several decades has seen his world upended by economic and cultural and technological change and feels powerless to stop it. You got to get in his head too. Number 3, you have to go through life with more than just passion for change. You need a strategy. I'll repeat that. I want you to have passion. You have to have a strategy. Not just awareness, but action. Not just hashtags, but votes. You see, change requires more than righteous anger. It requires a program and it requires organizing. Passion is vital, but you got to have a strategy. Change requires more than just speaking out. It requires listening as well. In particular, it requires listening to those with whom you disagree and being prepared to compromise. Those mileposts of our progress were not perfect. They did not make up for centuries of slavery or Jim Crow or eliminate racism or provide for 40 acres and a mule, but they made things better. And you know what? I will take better every time. I always tell my staff, better is good because you consolidate your gains and then you move on to the next fight from a stronger position. There's a good quote here. Nothing that God ever made is the same thing to more than one person. Think about that. That's why our democracy gives us a process designed for us to settle our disputes with argument and ideas and votes instead of violence and simple majority rule. So don't try to shut folks out. Don't try to shut them down, no matter how much you might disagree with them. James Baldwin once wrote, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced."